Hi guys, welcome to my video. I hope that you will find it helpful. If that is the case, then please subscribe and like so that we can keep this resource for free. Thank you.
What you need to understand with management theories is that management as a discipline really hasn't been around forever, even though people have been managing forever. But as a scientific endeavor, as a discipline, really it only started in 1776. And there was about 100 years or so that all of it was based on the work of two people. And those two people were Adam Smith. And Adam Smith was the pioneer when it came to division of labor. And Henry Town was the guy that said there is definitely better ways to do things. And he introduced the concept of efficiency. Now, when we look at the different management philosophies, we distinguish between really four focus areas of management. You get those who say really management is a scientific process. And in that regard, we are talking about Taylor and the Gilbreths. Then you get the people who say that management is really an administrative activity more than anything else. And the two guys that did all the research in that regard was Fayol and Weber. Then most of the guys that worked in this area actually said that management is about managing people more than anything else. And there you somehow have 7 people who talked about human relations manager: Mayo, Maslow, McGregor, Hertzberg, Levering, Drucker, and Hackman. And then you have quantitative management, which is McNamara, and the idea there is if you can measure it, you can manage it. So let's have a look at these in a little bit more detail. Okay, so I gave them names. These are not names that you have in your textbook, but I think it makes a lot more sense if we put it out this way. So you have the trend setters. And Adam Smith in 1776, he said, if you have a division of labor, then people can specialize in certain things. And if you have specialists, then you can increase your productivity. So that was really his brainwave. Then Henry Town said, in order to organize work, we must develop management principles, and if we then follow these management principles, we will improve efficiency. Now, when we read that, we say it's kind of logical, doesn't sound groundbreaking or anything, but there's always somebody who has to say something the first time, and these guys were the guys who did it the first time. Then we get the scientist, and the scientists are Frederick Taylor and the Gilbreth. It's a woman and wife team. I think it was Frank and Lilibet Gilbreth. And this is what Frederick Taylor said. He said workers will do the minimum. Okay, if you let them, you call that soldiering. In fact, if you do more than what the next person does, you will be very unpopular, and people will actually victimize you because you are making them look bad. Okay, so what we must then do, since people do the minimum in any case, is we must break any task down and investigate it, and then see if there's any redundant steps that can be taken out. And then we take those out, and then we standardize procedures and tools to increase production. Because if it is standardized, then it is easier to do and also easier to supervise. And that was indeed true. It's a good idea. So what you are going to see, and let me say this in the beginning before I even continue, is that there is a bit of truth in all these management philosophies. Okay, so it's not like it's one or the other. You either believe in scientific management or in quantitative or in human resource management, not the others. But any manager will have a focus on one of these areas that is more important to you than something else. Okay, The Gilbreth says we must identify the one best way to do something. Now, I think in business literacy, I actually called that to you the register of best practices that we must always keep. And then we select workers scientifically and teach them the best way to increase production. Okay, so firstly, you say this is the best way to do it. These are people who met the criteria of people who will be able to do it. Let's teach them how to do it, and that will increase production. Then we had, really shortly after them, we had the administrators. Now, let me just say something about the scientists, Taylor and the Gilbreths. At the turn of the previous century, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, the philosophical movement that really shaped the world at the time was logical positivism. Now, you don't have to worry about too much, but I will tell you what it entailed. Logical positivism simply means that there is a belief that everything can be known and that everything will be known. Now, shortly after that, they of course had a pandemic similar to COVID, but much more deadly, and that kind of ends all ideas of everything can be known and everything will be known. Okay, but so this is really the philosophical tradition that these guys found themselves at the time. So then, just after the First World War, rather, you had Henry Fayol and Max Weber. So Fayol said we can divide the business into 6 activity groups, adhering to 14 management principles, and this will allow the manager to adapt to circumstances. Now, both those activity groups and the 14 management principles can sometimes be asked, not all 14, but so that you can just find those tables in your textbook. Max Weber said that organizations must be structured correctly to achieve the best results. And he called that structuring bureaucracy. Now, in his mind, bureaucracy was not you hurry up and then wait a little bit more. In his mind, bureaucracy is the controlled and scientific way to manage a business. Okay. So, not much difference from what the scientists believe, but a little bit more emphasis on management and a little bit less of an emphasis on control that the scientist had. And then, of course, we had the behavioral managers. Now, in your textbook, there's a little paragraph on each of these guys. What I'm saying to you is, could I identify the one main thing that each one of these guys contributed to the discussion? So firstly, you had Alton Mayo, and he said motivation is driven by needs. That's what he said. So if we can identify the needs, then we can motivate. Okay. Maslow then went one step further. He said, I agree with Alton Mayo that motivation is driven by needs, but these needs can be classified according to a hierarchy. And he then talked about lower order and higher order needs. And he had this idea that if the lower order needs are not satisfied, then there's no purpose in trying to motivate people via the higher order needs. And then in times to come, people, even to this day, have worked on Maslow's theory and say, you know what, really, it's not that simple. It's a little bit more complicated, but there were some good ideas there. And so his hierarchy has become a little bit more complicated, but that's not necessarily his own work. Now, last time I looked, I don't know. I think Mr. Maslow might still be alive, but he will be very old by now. Then you had McGregor, and he had 3 theories. He says the satisfaction of needs does not always motivate. And he talked about different management theories, theories X, Y, and Z, in which he said theory X is the one where you actually believe that a manager can do something theory. Y means basically everything went wrong, and Z is somewhere in the middle. Don't worry, I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit just now. Hertzberg said we must distinguish between motivational and maintenance factors. And what he meant there is there are certain things that motivates and certain things that simply maintain. So he would say that a salary, paying somebody to do work, that's not a motivational thing, but it's a maintenance thing, because if you stop paying them, he's going to stop doing it. Okay, so it's not really motivating. It's just something that must be in place, or else the work doesn't even start. Okay. Levering was a fantastic guy, a very positive person who believed that great workplaces make great employees. Okay. Now, Branson also kind of believes that, né? So, but now Branson is a businessman. Levering was a behavioral manager, so it's a bit of a difference. Drucker said we must manage by objective. So if you sit with an employee and you tell that employee exactly what you are expecting of him, and together you set certain objectives, then really the employee manages himself, and he is now striving to work towards the objectives. And then what Hackman said is the task itself is the key to employee motivation. Now, I think that's true to a degree for professionals, but you have some jobs that consist of plain menial tasks, and those do not excite people at all, and still you have to keep them motivated to do it. So, but yeah, if the task is more meaningful, then people will be more inclined to do it. But what I have found personally is that you have to remember people of why they're doing something, and why that is important. And then, of course, the last guy there is should actually be. He's not a behavioral manager. He should have his own little block there. I don't know why. That is really McNamara, and he talked about scientific management through trend analysis. Now, the interesting thing about McNamara is that this approach that he had to management has sometimes been very successful and has sometimes been a complete disaster.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you found it valuable, please subscribe and like. Thank you.